there are two tasks that the leader of the marketing team that's trying to embed AI needs to have. One is explore and the other one is to exploit. So, and one comes before the other, right? But they're different. So you need to prepare your organization to explore AI in the right places to make sure that you have a chance of discovering and unlocking new value, right? And once you're able to identify that is a working opportunity, then you exploit it, then you scale it, and you transform your organization to become, use that aspect of Gen AI as the way you do things, right? And I think that the problem, one of the challenges that managers are facing today is that they cannot transition from the exploration stage to the exploiting stage.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
So, hey, Rex, you know what? Here's kind of the issue with marketing org, right? And listen, if you talk to any marketer, they're in one of three states. They are starting a marketing org, reorg. They're finishing a marketing reorg, or in the middle of a marketing reorg. Like, there is no other state in a marketer's life. And yet it wasn't until, listen, Omar's been this is a life's work for Omar. He did his way back at Coca-Cola 20 years ago, so I don't want to take full credit. But he came in with us about 6-7 years ago with the MMA and the global board to really figure out what is really effective marketing org. How do you tie marketing org to business, and can it be? We'll have him speak to it, but it's like can it really be a competitive weapon? And so what we're trying to do, and how does it really contribute to org? Like, nobody knew any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Greg, it's interesting. When I worked with Microsoft years ago, I remember coming in and they referred to it as reorg season. They actually had every 18 months they had a season.
like leaves turning colors.
Exactly. Yeah. Except it was an 18-month cycle instead of a 12-month cycle.
Yeah. Now it's more like the hurricane season, right? But yeah.
The hurricane season. Well, it's actually getting hotter, and there'll be more of them, especially with AI. So I know you like stories, Greg. I like data and patterns. And so when I saw his work and saw him really trying to put together a data set and look at the contributions to enterprise value based upon the data and the organization structure and the way you organize it, I was really excited. I was also really excited because there's this transition point from where we're at now to trying to figure out how do you embed AI in an organization. And it's a lot easier if you understand how your organization is structured, what you're trying to achieve, the pathways that you're using to get things done, and to have that more kind of structured way of approaching the problem. So, I think there's just a huge opportunity and discussion from today's guest. Do you want to introduce our guest?
No, I wouldn't be. I could be more excited, and I would take it right back if you tried. One of my favorite people in the whole world. So listen, listeners, our guest today is Dr. Omar Rodriguez. He's a professor of marketing practice at Emory University. He's also a partner of a company now called MarCaps. Marketing Capabilities is basically what that is. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about some AI research, but we're going to take a little trip back. But Omar, please say hello to everybody.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Greg. Great to see you guys, and thanks for the opportunity to share some of our work with your listeners. As you said, my name is Omar Rodriguez-Vilá. I'm professor of marketing at Emory University. My path into academia took a long detour because I was a practitioner in the Coca-Cola company for many years. And I brought a lot of that experience into my research interests and my work with the MMA and with you, Greg, over the last 7 years. That has been transformative for us, certainly, and hopefully helpful for some. Yeah.
Well, and the story is too, back to kind of stories, Rex, to your point, what happened is that Coke called me. They had done a bunch of research with us. They didn't implement any change. They spent $500,000, in fact, in research that we were doing around the world with them, and they created no change. And they basically called me and said, "We suck." That's basically what they said. And they said, "Here's some money, and we want you to go talk to this guy named Omar Rodriguez. He used to be here. He's a professor now, and we think he's the key to the answer, and this is a problem that needs to be solved." So, but Omar, maybe talk a little bit about before we get into it here, you've been doing work with, Sundar Bhagwat, Dr. Neil Morgan, Shubhu Mitra, and then Rebecca Messina is kind of a part of the core MarCaps team. But talk about, before we get into the AI thing, talk about the core work that you started to do with the global board so that the listener has some context of what you've been going after here.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to start. So, I mean, ultimately, the goal of our research over the last 5 years with the MMA has been to try to understand winning marketing organizations. In today's environment, what are the traits of the organizations that are actually generating results that are outperforming their peers, that are kind of meeting their goals, versus those that are not quite getting there, right? That are getting lost along the way. And we have, over the course of the work, we have uncovered some traits. And it comes down to really one core thing, which is the operating model of marketing has been transformed, but nobody has told us in which direction. So there is not an instruction book. And a lot of us in the field, primarily, the CMOs are now trying to figure out what is this new operating model. And a lot of it has to do with embedding new things, but it's also about carrying over from the past things that are foundational and still needs to stay with us. And there's a balance between those things that is hard to manage. So at the end of the day, there's just a lot of confusion on how to organize and how to operate a marketing organization today. And our research is trying to untangle that confusion and help CMOs think more clearly about what they can do to lead a winning marketing organization.
And the power in this work too, Omar, is that you have actually figured out how to tie marketing organizational decisions to financial performance of the company. Like, this shit really matters.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't think anybody, I mean, at some sort of superficial level, we maybe have understood that, but not in the clarity that you and Neil and Sundar and everybody had brought to this, correct?
Yeah. This really matters to the outcomes that the company cares about. This matters to financial outcomes, and Neil and Sundar have been doing a lot of work on what we call CPS, the Capability Power Score, to establish that connection more clearly between capability decisions and organization design decisions and financial outcomes that care to the CFO, for instance, and the CMO, right? And so that is one aspect. But the other aspect also, it's about kind of the health of our discipline. What is the state of marketers working in your organization? And we measure, one of the key KPIs that we measure in our research is the NPS scores of marketing talent. To what extent will people in your company, in your teams, recommend their friends or colleagues to come work in marketing in your organization? And frankly, I was shocked how low those numbers were the first few times we started collecting them. And now they have improved a bit, but we certainly have a marketer satisfaction issue in terms of creating environments in which our marketers can thrive and can do their best work. And that ultimately impacts performance, but also impacts your ability to retain talent, to attract talent, and to do your best work.
Yep. Omar, what's the number? Do you give it to we'll turn over to Rex to talk about AI?
The average is around 2. So it used to be negative.
To be fair, at a quintile, if I remember right, some can be as high as 50 NPS. But it means if 2 is the average, then it means that there's a negative 40 down there too.
There are a lot of utility.
No, it's a disaster. We in marketing don't like marketing, it appears.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Well, what do you trace before we get into the AI part? And staying on that thread, what do you trace the dissatisfaction to, and how does that relate to the way the company organizes?
It's a great point, Rex. I think it comes down to 3 things. So a winning marketing organization. The anatomy of it, in a way, has to have a clear why. So an articulated, written down, but meaningful reason why marketing exists at your company. Not why marketing exists in general. At your particular company, what its mission connected to the growth of your enterprise. Honestly, that simple, obvious step is not frequently taken. And the problem is that marketing can mean many different things to many different people. So you come in at a company with your own mindset about what marketing is or should be doing, and you're conflicting with the mindset of other people in the same company, and nobody has aligned on what are we here to do in the first place. So we're all trying to do different things. And that drives a lot of friction. So clarity of vision is one. The other one is clarity on the what. So given that mission, given that role we have, what are the capabilities that matter most? And let's make sure that we are best in the world at those and not at everything. Right now in our capability map, the one we have collectively built with the MMA, we've narrowed it down to 90 capabilities that define a modern marketing organization today. You can't be great at 90 things, right? So that decision about what you're going to be the best in the world at, where are you going to match others, and frankly, where are you just simply not going to worry too much about it, that's a choice that really matters in enabling your organization to win. And the last one is operating clarity. Basic things like who does what and who has the decision-making power, and what are the principles, not just the processes that govern the way this organization works. Those things need to be clarified. And if not, you end up with, the reality of marketing today is that there has been a demographic shift in our discipline with many people from many different backgrounds populating what marketing is today. You have computer scientists and sociologists working together. They're not going to understand each other if you don't give them clarity of operating principles and processes. So the nature of the marketer today is so different to the way it was 20 years ago. They need clarity of how the work gets done, and that's the operating principles.
Those three things. The bridge. That's really the bridge to the AI part, because especially your point about operating clarity, both principles and process, I think is really where AI begins to connect here. Mm-hmm. You talked about who has the D, who has the decision making. Whether I was using a framework when I was working with a retailer. It was they used RACI, mm-hmm. Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, Informed, and we added in implementer to that as well, because you needed that for some of the things we were doing. And it was interesting, after we worked with that retailer, we realized that many of the companies we worked with did not have that structure. And so we would have to do that when we first began. And now what I'm finding with AI, especially as we begin to look at applying agents into the mm-hmm. process and the system, mm-hmm. It becomes important and valuable to know where the human in the loop fits, mm-hmm. or whether the human in the at the helm making the decision, what the decision flow and process is. Talk to us a bit more about what your thoughts are about if you are to, I think our estimate is over half of marketing activities could be automated with AI. Mm. So if you were to begin to take a different task and automate it, mm-hmm. what would be the steps that you would walk through with your system and your way of thinking about processes and systems and purpose, mm-hmm. to then get to the point where you begin to say, now you can begin to turn on these AI agents or build it into the workflow?
Okay. I'm going to have to take a few steps back before I can answer directly that question, but it's an important question. And I think the first thing I would say is that there are two tasks that the leader of the marketing team that's trying to embed AI needs to have. One is explore, and the other one is to exploit. So, and one comes before the other, right? Mm-hmm. But they're different. So you need to prepare your organization to explore AI in the right places to make sure that you have a chance of discovering and unlocking new value, right? And once you're able to identify that is a working opportunity, then you exploit it, then you scale it, and you transform your organization to become, use that aspect of Gen AI as the way you do things, right? And I think that the problem, one of the challenges that managers are facing today is that they cannot transition from the exploration stage to the exploiting stage. There is a proliferation of what we call pilots. And in fact, when we did the research, the second biggest challenge that marketers were reporting today in their ability to adopt Gen AI was, I cannot scale tests.
I've heard that.
I can start tests. I cannot scale them. So, and when you come down, it's like what?
But that has a lot to do with the missing D part, right? The bridge between the lab that's doing the test or the person that's doing the test and them having the authority to act on the rest of the organization.
Yes,
isn't it?
the D as part of a governance structure. So The first thing that, if I hear somebody say, that's my problem, I can start, but I cannot scale, I immediately ask about governance. So talk to me about what is the governance structure that you have in place to assess the tests and make decisions about these tests, right? And if, for instance, Andrea Breimer at Ally, I remember, one of the first conversations we had with her about how her organization was getting ready to explore and exploit, she went right there and she said, we have a council, an AI council, that is cross-functional, that it has all the right lenses in it. And that's where all of our pilots come in, and they either from there they take off and scale or they die. But we have this one group of people that are looking and are measuring. So if you don't have that governance structure, that you're going to be at risk of this starting but not scaling. The other issue is, and this is something that as marketers we fall into this trap all the time. We call things pilots, but we manage them as projects. See, what is a pilot? A pilot is an initiative that has a hypothesis behind it and an intended outcome that you are measuring and then making a decision about it, right? Either go forward or kill. That's a pilot. That's the definition of a pilot. We call things a pilot, but we don't put that rigor in. So people go in and they try things and they keep trying things and they try other things, but nobody's stopping and checking and, okay, what were the increments? What were the benefits versus the cost? And does this pass our threshold for approval? And are we killing it? That's the key. Are you killing the project because it doesn't meet your threshold? Or are you letting it alive like a zombie in your organization? It's something that Francisco
Do you think
Crespo...
the zombie's a problem? Because it's interesting you say that, because I actually saw the opposite, which is, and Greg and I lived through this when we wrote our first book, and we're doing a lot of the AI tests. It was a vice chairman of Johnson & Johnson who basically gave us the framework, right?
Yeah, MTA test. Yeah. You said AI test, yeah. MTA
oh, I'm sorry.
Right. We're developing
MTA tests.
Right.
They basically said, look, you have to have a scenario planning and you have to have a decision rule.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting, and I remember this when I worked with Coca-Cola, they were the fourth company to do to know about social media effectiveness, right behind Adidas or Adidas if you prefer, and Electronic Arts and one other brand. They were one of the first to know about the effectiveness of online advertising. They were the first to know about social media and scale with the work that Dennis was doing with Sprite and so forth, and John Hackett was doing with some other areas. Yet they were not the first to scale it. Mm-hmm. They always got stuck. It's like, wow, you guys had the findings so much further ahead than anyone else, and yet you didn't exploit it.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me it wasn't necessarily the zombie project that wasn't being killed. It were these successful ones that they couldn't then turn on and put everywhere. Mm-hmm. Is that, do you see that? I mean, it's interesting. Do you see the problem is not killing things soon enough in the zombie, or the green shoot that doesn't get the care and feeding to grow into the mighty bamboo tree?
Yeah, so let me speak to both, because the zombies are a problem because they consume a lot of resources and generate very little value. Yeah. So they keep people busy on something, but it's not heading anywhere, right? And Francisco Crespo, the former chief growth officer of Coke, used to talk a lot about how critical it is to kill the zombies before you can free up the organization resources. But then on the other side, you're also true that large organizations, particularly that have installed ways of working from the past, have a lot of challenges scaling new ways, and part of it is because the way we have become accustomed to believe that in order for you to disrupt yourself, you need to pull it outside of your organization, right? Like that's how we think about disruptive innovation. IBM used to do that in the past. Like you have something truly new, put it outside your current bureaucracy, because otherwise the bureaucracy will kill it. Well, what happens with things like Gen AI or digital marketing or social media is that those teams that worked outside created something in the isolation, and then they couldn't bring it back in, because they were disconnected from the objectives of the company, what mattered to the company. They were in their own world. They moved to an island, they could grow there, but there was no bridge. And that's the thing that the leader needs to manage. And the way to manage that is to go back to what are the key performance challenges that we're facing today that you want to apply this technology to. So it's not about the technology, it's about our business challenges. If you keep that in mind and then give the job of the technology to help address it, that becomes a bridge where those people that were working on a silo can become part of the larger enterprise.
So Omar, maybe give a little background to the research you've done, and then let's get more into the depth of some of that. Yeah, what you started, what you came to us about a year ago and said, hey, here's what's needed.
I think the interest that we had was in seeing in conversations with CMOs about Gen AI. Everybody seemed to be very excited about the potential, but somewhat disappointed about the practice. There was this growing gap between those two, and what I'm saying that there's clearly a distinction, right? There is a percentage of companies and CMOs and teams that are not reflective of what I just said, that are very much ahead and are leveraging, exploiting and exploring Gen AI in an amazing way. Based on our research, that's about 20%. Then you have another 10 to 15 that are comfortably sitting outside this trend and are saying, you know what, not for me right now, I'm too busy, I'll let other ones pick it up. What we were interested in is the people in the middle, right? That are interested in adopting Gen AI, but I seem unable to fully embrace it. So we started with interviews with CMOs to try to understand what were some of the challenges. Then we did a survey that your team, Greg, helped us do across 547 companies or so to understand their challenges and their actions and the decisions that enable them to unlock the value. And then we did further studies with specific companies to kind of get more tangible in some of the things that they were doing, right? And that's what we landed with what we presented in the webinar about not only a better understanding of the challenges, but some of the solutions that help them embrace Gen AI more effectively.
So talk to us about the solutions.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you might recall from the conversation we had kind of like a month and a half ago, it starts by getting the organization ready for Gen AI. So even before you start trying anything, you know, is the org ready? And by having the org ready, there are like 5 things that we saw that were very valuable, that companies were saying these are making a difference in enabling me to practice it and embrace it. One was, some of these are not going to surprise you, okay? Training and education programs to just make sure that there's a wide level of awareness, but not only awareness, you know, base level of competency in using some Gen AI tools in specific tasks. So distribute it. Don't make it something that only a few people can know about. Second, again, pretty straightforward, and I'm sure most of your listeners would resonate, leadership support. So the leaders are actually building the case, pushing for the case, calling for action. Third, we talked about creating a dedicated Gen AI team or task force that could become that governance board. And then fourth was building the Gen AI infrastructure. And that one is interesting because that one kind of challenges us to change some things that we have done differently in the past. For instance, the way we organize our data. So most of marketers think of data for analysis purposes or for reporting purposes, right? So I need data and I need a dashboard to know how my activities are performing. So I'm looking at outputs or I'm looking at outcomes, right? Or I need data in order to build models, like do econometric modeling to understand, the implications of some of my decisions on the sales changes. So that's for analytics. What we maybe have not internalized, and Rex, of course, you know this 100 times more than me, but the role of data now in not only analysis or reporting, but in training. So
yeah, it's so different.
Yes. And that is like a new muscle, right? In the way we relate to data, in the way we capture it, in the way we structure it. A very important shift is the role of input data, not output data. And in fact, that's what
the whole pipeline's for it. Yeah, it's such an important point.
Yes.
And I want to draw a really strong underline under what Omar just said for the listeners, because what he was just describing, for he and I think I'm sure we're totally on the same wavelength. When he's talking about econometric, you're talking about something that looks like a spreadsheet, if you want to imagine it that way. And there's Omar's nodding his head yes right now for the listeners. So it's usually labeled. You have you think about the first row, you know exactly what it is. You've got numeric representations in the cells. That's not what you need for AI. You can use it for that, by the way. You can use that in RAG models. It's helpful. But what you might end up using is summary reports, for example. All the PowerPoints you ever had. Oh, and by the way, the PowerPoints, one AI can read the words in it, but can't read the pictures. Then you have to then turn it into images because the PDF doesn't only renders the words. And so there's all these like little nuances and things that we're still contending with that you have to prepare the data and think about the pipeline of data and how it flows in a different way. So hopefully that's helpful for the listeners.
Thank you,
That was such an important point.
Thank
Omar.
you, Rex. You did that 100 times better than I could have, but that is exactly the point. So in fact, we are pushing for this idea that instead of key performance indicators, you also need key performance inputs. So KPIs in a new type, right? And for instance, the work that Memorable.io does in unpacking a piece of content and trying to then understand and predict decisions at the content design level of what's going to drive not only better conversion, but better memorability of your content. It's at a level of granularity that was not even possible a year or 2 years ago. And in order to keep track of that, you need to keep track of all your inputs in a lot more details than before. You almost need to become a historian and really value how and what you are doing, not only what you're getting. That is not the way we are trained. We, in fact, ignore our inputs. We focus only on outputs, right? And when we keep track of things, because what we are compensated and incentivized for is the results. When you're trying to prepare the org for Gen AI, you need to care a lot about capturing your inputs.
So some of that, just to put a fine point on that too, because I think it's going to matter for different areas. Just make sure. So if you're in customer service, you're talking about collecting all those conversations.
Yes,
that's right.
If you're in advertising, it's
That's
collecting all the ad data. And I mean, I've tried to get past ad data from companies. It's actual ad creative tied to performance.
Yeah.
I don't think it barely exists. I think I found
one
or two.
And what you just said is
it's insane.
Right. Coming back to that spreadsheet example, what we normally have something called a creative ID, and it might be an ad name, and it's a textual description.
Yes.
You can't do what Omar just described that Memorable.io or some of the other companies are doing, because you need computer vision that actually looks at the ad frame by frame and then can look for features and can abstract those features. So you need what's called you'll like this name, Greg, a DAM, a digital asset management system, to be able to have the actual source creative, not just a label of the ad.
I've been through this. I tried to build a business around this about 10, 15 years ago, and I couldn't find ad creative tied to performance measures of any kind. It's crazy. And so let alone outside, it doesn't exist within the companies too. And Omar, so I'm assuming then that there's, 5, 10, 15, 20. How many of these inputs are there that you think a company ultimately needs to get to?
Oh, I mean, it varies on the type of asset that you're using, right? But I think that what I have seen in terms of what's possible today of breaking a piece of content into so many different dimensions to understand what might work better than others, you could take one social media post and break it into 20 dimensions. So now expand that into all the different assets that you use, your website, your emails, your campaigns, your billboards, online, offline. So I think that, which tends to become almost too much, right? So you're going to focus on where you spend the most money, where the biggest return is going to be. But I think the bigger point is to start by getting your organization ready for Gen AI, and that means looking at things that you might have overlooked, details as what kind of data are you collecting and in what form are you keeping it? Because at the end of the day, as you guys know, we're really increasingly competing on algorithms, right? The quality of our algorithms is really what we are beating each other on. And a better algorithm just means better data and better training. So it's all about how effectively can you train, which is not different to what we've always done, right? It's just that in the past we were training people. We would hire a great talented person, and we would know intuitively that we needed to give that person great opportunity inside the company and move them around different functions and then give them the skills they needed so that they eventually can become a CEO and transform this company, right? To me, Gen AI is the same.
That's right. I think that's a great metaphor and a great way of thinking about it. 10 years ago, I did a TED Talk about shifting from being knowledge workers to insight workers. And the idea was that we would begin to database more of our knowledge. And this was, easier machine learning, like collaborative filtering back then. And it was interesting. Part of it came up, Greg, because of our work with Procter & Gamble. Mm-hmm. We had learned with the work that you and I did that orange background colors and ads for Olay worked better. I remember reading a story by Jack Neff 8 years later that they discovered that orange ads worked better for beauty. And it's like they had to relearn the thing that they already knew because organizationally they had forgotten. And there was a McKinsey consultant, John Forsyth, I think who had said it, is if only Nestle knew what Nestle knows. Mm-hmm. When he was working with Nestle, it was just like this amount. And so I think that you're onto something that's really important, which is we have to start thinking about the reports we generate, the ads we develop, all of those content pieces that AI can potentially understand. It's part of the reason why I've encouraged Greg to record every single call he does now, because we think that that's creating a data set that will be able to train AI to be able to understand and find patterns.
I think HR wanted that for legal reasons too, but that's
well, actually, the interesting thing is that HR and legal tend to be the enemy of this because they're like, don't record anything.
Yeah, you're right.
And to me, that's like, well, actually and again, my risk tolerance, I'm an entrepreneur, so right. Probably more open to risk, but I'm like, no, actually, it's such an important asset. There's so much knowledge and value there. Man, start capturing and knowing that you're going to curate and do something with it.
Yeah.
So after you do that, Omar, though, how do you then take what you just described, which was, training and leadership and, the task force and now the data and the infrastructure and these new pipelines for these new types of data inputs? What do you do next to make AI land in an organization and be a competitive differentiator?
So I go back to this notion of exploration and exploitation, right? So explore. So imagine now that you have a team in your company and you want them to go figure out better ways of improving your outcomes or your results based on using Gen AI. Basically, you're asking them to go out and explore. It's probably a good idea to go out and explore a new territory to bring a map with you, right? And a map, it's only as good as how well does it help you navigate this new territory and find what it is that you want to find, right? So one thing that I found some of the CMOs that were getting the most advantage out of Gen AI do is being very proactive at designing a map that worked for them, for where to explore and where to exploit. And that is why, and in the webinar we did, we spent quite a bit of time talking about one potential map. It's not the only one, but one potential map. And this came partly by the conversation I had with Vineet Mehra at Chime, when I asked him, I started every conversation with the CMOs with the same question: which application of Gen AI are you most excited about? And he was one of the few that the only one that stopped me and said, before I answer your question, let me tell you about the framework we're using to guide our exploration. Basically, my map.
Wow.
And then he went on to describe his map to me. And that's when I realized he had done something that few others had done, which is, let me clarify how I'm going to go out and explore before I jump in. Now, when it comes to designing the map, we think that two dimensions are really critical. One is, so many of the way that I see the maps being described today are task-based. So content, so what are you doing, content or media management or customer service, right? Those are tasks. We think that it's more valuable to turn those tasks into benefits and organize your exploration around the types of benefits that marketing creates. For instance, engagement, conversion, experience, strategic value, operational value, knowledge value. And if you guys are familiar with some of our work, you will realize that is is our framework, right, for organizing marketing today. And we think that within each of those 6 areas, you have a lot of different tasks. But before you go into the nitty-gritty of the task, make a choice about which area do you want to focus. Is it about creating faster, better knowledge, or is it about enabling you to make better strategic decisions, or is it about significantly improving the customer experience with your company? And then there are 10 different tasks within that you can use in GenAI for. That's one dimension of the map. The other dimension, so think of it as columns and kind of rows in a matrix form. The rows are kind of the job description. So there are 3 jobs you can give GenAI. Lower my cost or my resources. That could be money or time or effort. Help me get to better quality, right? Think of better content that leads to higher conversion. Or the last job you could give GenAI is help me disrupt the market. Help me do something that was not possible a year ago and nobody has even thought about it yet. And frankly, that last job to me is the most exciting and is the least assigned. So we measured the incidence of this map across different industries. And it wouldn't surprise you that most companies are focusing GenAI on the external activities like engagement or customer experience and in reducing cost. That's it. It's a great place to start, but way too early to stop there, right?
And just to repeat for the listener, because that may have gone by really fast. So efficiency, performance, crazy, wild-ass new ideas.
Disrupt.
Transformational to the product and or the service being delivered is really what that last one is.
Yeah.
And Omar, have you seen anybody go after number 3 yet? You seen any?
Well,
you heard inklings of that yet?
I think we have seen the potential of that. For instance, the potential for digital twins in healthcare now. For somebody to create a digital copy of your system so that a cancer treatment can be personalized to your unique DNA and genome and condition today, that is as disruptive as it could come, right? You could envision a digital twin to be applied also not to a patient, but to a customer, right, or a customer segment. And I know, Rex, you're doing a lot of work with synthetic research and creating customer personas using this sort of technology. So to me, that could become very disruptive because it could help you uncover market opportunities that nobody else is seeing. I'm just not sure that people are pushing into those spaces as much as I think they should.
Right. Hey, you mentioned, you unfortunately gave away the name for that the person who had the best map out there, or the best orientation. Have you heard anybody? Nobody else has come close to that, Omar? Is there anybody else's who? I mean, you can't use Venice now because we mentioned his name. You can't say what he told you, unfortunately.
No.
You have anybody? You can't use their name, but you can tell what they told you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I will say, like, I think most of the people that I interview were exceeding at multiple areas, if not a lot of the areas that we were looking at. Heather Freeland at Adobe, she has really been very effective at reimagining her organization for GenAI and getting it ready for it. So, and in ways that I found really intriguing. Like, for instance, she said, we are completely redoing our brand identity because we realized we didn't have the level of consistency across geographies, nor the level of granularity that is now needed to train better models. So I need to go beyond having a visual identity system, which was kind of where you would stop, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Clarity on my brand personality, my brand voice, photography style, how we talk, how we don't talk, do we use slang or not? All those details in the past would have been kind of useless because you couldn't act on them. Today, as you know, they're necessary to train models that can do content that it is like you, right? So I thought that, there is just a lot of good work happening out there in that part of preparing for GenAI.
I like that point about the thinking about what the prompts would be that you'd need to have a personalized interaction. If you're doing a chatbot and so forth, you're needing to generate that content. Even if you have AI writing your proposals and doing the RFPs, it needs to know your tone and your voice. In some ways, it picks it up automatically because of if you're giving it, hey, here are the last 20 proposals we've turned in, then it's going to learn that somewhat automatically. So there's this interesting playback where I think what I'd say is, encouraging customers to think, or people listening to this, you don't have to do all this on your own. If you're actually feeding it through the AI, one of the benefits is you can actually get it to reflect on itself and its content that's derived from your organization. And it's almost like holding up a mirror and say, how would you describe our personality? How would you describe our tone? How would you create our content rules? And then you can look at that as a human, and with a human in the loop, you can edit it and tweak it and change it. So it actually is easier than it sounds from what Omar just told you if you really begin to use the tools properly.
Hey, Omar, of all the people you talked to, did you get a heat map of where opportunities might exist? I think some of that I've seen from you, it varies by sector, but what do you think if you were to point people,
It does vary by sector, but I will tell you that the general state of affairs right now, as the best we can tell with the data we have, is that most of the emphasis is on external customer-facing touch points and activities and cost-saving efforts. So there is not a lot of activity yet on internal sources of value for marketing. So decisions about strategy, defining customers, understanding markets, creating products, guiding innovation. A lot of those internal activities, they're starting, but they're not at the same level as bots for customer service or for social media content or backgrounds in photography and these kind of things. And then for operational value in terms of enabling teams to work more efficiently together and accelerating the knowledge that the organization is acquiring. And finally, knowledge creation, insights. All of that internal activity has a lot lower incidence, and anything that has to do with quality or disruption has significantly lower incidence. So to me, those are like the open spaces where the
huge opportunity there.
Yeah, huge opportunity.
Massive.
Huge opportunity. And the problem with the disruption is that we know it's going to come. It came with the smartphone, right? The problem is that it came from startups, not from incumbents. Incumbents get occupied by lowering costs because that's what their investors or their managers are asking for. Show me why am I saving money? And then you're spending this valuable time, this opportunity window in saving cost, and then you're letting open the opportunity to invent something completely new. And then a startup is going to do it.
But that almost seems like the natural cycle of things, though. I mean, I think part of it is it's easier if you're an incumbent to look at this through the lens of the budget. Where are we spending the money? Where do we think we can get the most upside? And so you focus on those areas first to truly be imaginative. I mean, Greg loves the example of Uber being the first killer app that truly was natively smartphone and mobile. You couldn't have done it without it. And of course, it didn't come from the taxi companies and all the incumbents there. It came from a startup.
But if I was in a large multinational corporation right now, that's the tension I would be feeling. It depends on the culture of your company. So you have cost cultures and you have growth cultures. If you operate in a growth culture company, then you're going to have more space to be invested in, right?
That's right. You ought to be looking. That's right.
But if you're more in a cost culture environment where productivity is king, which tends to be the public firms, large companies, then you have to push through.
This is kind of interesting. So, listen, I know your original work was around sort of a defining, I remember the first meeting you and I had with those major CMOs where none of these major CMOs, I mean, the biggest CMOs in the world, everybody didn't agree on what the role of marketing or the role of the CMO was. And that led you to define that there's three basic marketing strategies, right? One is transaction, the DTC kind of thing, experience, customer experience, and then brand. Okay. Well, I don't think any of us really had envisioned DTC or the transaction-oriented marketing that's really risen to the top. And that brought in a whole series of new brands, right? Harry's and a bunch of other brands. Okay, so here's you know where my question's going. You want to try to make any kind of prediction? Is AI going to create a whole new stream of companies and products? Is there an AI-driven somehow company that competes with Unilever or competes with Ford or competes with, I don't know, is that what's going to happen next? Is that what's being opened up here?
I mean, it's a great push. I think that's almost inevitable because the potential for commercializing the advantages of Gen AI are right now seems almost limitless, right? Like it's up to the imagination of people on how we can commercialize it. So I think it is. Now, I would say the following. Anytime there is a movement, there's a counter movement, right?
That's very Hegel of you.
So it is, but there is some truth to
Explain.
that, right? Like, last year, vinyl records grew 20%. Did you know that? And they exceeded CD
Vinyl records
sales.
grew. Okay.
Vinyl records are growing. You know what the largest selling retail clothing style is?
You're
Resale.
talking to
Resale.
people don't have a,
Listen,
a visual
I
for
married
it.
fashion. Doesn't mean I have it. Okay, so go ahead. Yeah.
Vintage clothes
Okay.
are selling faster, 15 times faster than regular resale.
But are they?
basically.
But are they dominant? They're not dominant in the marketplace, though. I mean, these are slivers.
No,
though,
No,
right?
but he's saying that like, there's a throwback.
There is a throwback.
You create
okay,
you
okay.
create the
Oh, okay,
thesis, and you have this antithesis pushback.
Yes,
But
big.
what's gonna happen here? I mean, I think listen, I think legal about to be completely redone, right? I mean, that's gonna service business, consulting, probably likely advertising, anything there's service, and you create greater efficiency, productivity, better alignment, better mastering
Well,
of
and
massive
Greg,
data
I
insights.
hate to break it to us, but on the podcast, I've been playing around with Google's Notebook LM. Creates a pretty good podcast if you just give it some notes automatically.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it sounds too soulless to me. Yeah, but it doesn't mean they're not going to get better. I hear you. Yeah, but I guess Omar. So those are sectors, I guess, that are going to be totally revived. But are we actually? I'm trying to think more of my members that sell actual tangible physical products, typically.
Yeah.
Those who are the big marketing-driven companies, or they just capturing advantage to how they're doing better marketing. I mean, that could exist here. I mean, the number of ads that companies are putting out is. I've had a couple of my other podcast conversations. It's insane how many ads have to be produced nowadays.
Yes,
How
the
many
amount of
creative
assets. But I mean, where I was going is that
go.
yes, you need a map to figure out where you're going to play with Gen AI and adopt it. But and maybe this is a little bit provocative, but you also need to think about where you're going to reject Gen AI. Where are you not going to use it? Because
What is that?
and for instance, I'll give you an example. Dove's decision not to use Gen AI in the creation of ads because they are trying to stay true to the idea of authenticity in beauty.
Yeah. Yep.
That it is counterintuitive. But I think that as brands begin to populate our entertainment and our content experience with Gen AI material, there's going to be a new renewed value for non-Gen AI work. And I think a company that's really leading on this should keep an eye on both.
That's the Thomas Edison thesis, right? He was asked, will electricity become so inexpensive that only poor people will still be burning candles? And he said something to the effect of, no, electricity will become so inexpensive only the very wealthy can afford to burn candles. And it truly became and it's an interesting pattern where these new technologies become luxury items with the old throwback, which is what you're describing with vintage
remember
and
water
vinyl
used to be free.
I'll give you the most specific example of this. You go to a drive-through today in most fast food restaurants, you're going to be met by an audio box or a screen, right?
Yes. Yep.
Except one place, Chick-fil-A. Go to Chick-fil-A and you're going to be met by a person who's going to take your order. Okay? In fact, they're going the opposite direction. And it generates significant amount of value for them. That's all I'm saying, that you want to push through the adoption, but you want to keep an eye on where actually might I want to go counter movement because there's more value people are ignoring.
Yeah, that's a good differentiator. It's an interesting point.
In talking to all these CMOs and the research you've done, do you have a big idea? Have you spotted Uber? I mean, I've said to the board, I think the funny thing about AI is that there is no killer app yet.
Yet.
We don't know what it looks like yet.
Yeah. I think I have some thoughts, but I'm not going to.
Oh, come on.
But I will tell you this, and I don't think this is anything earth-shattering or not something that you guys already know. I think that big idea is going to be around personalization. It's going to be about that.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree. I think that's what it is. It's a whole new level that we've never ever experienced or understood in any sort of way.
Because ultimately, we are in 200 years.
You're not the only one on this podcast to say that too, Omar. By the way.
Well, yeah, and we're getting glimmers of that with the personal relationship bots. I mean, there's over 1 million people who have a virtual girlfriend or boyfriend, usually girlfriend. So it's there's these glimmers of these things beginning to emerge.
I mean, at the end of the day, marketing is a game about finding product market fit, right? That's what we're constantly trying to do and beat each other on. Like, how do I get better product market fit than you? And if Gen AI allows me to go at a personal level and get better product market fit that way, that I'm going to win 9 out of 10 times. So to me, and it has a lot of implications for me as an educator, right? Because I teach at scale. I teach in a class of 80 students, and I teach them all the same lecture. I should ideally be teaching each of them a different lecture based on what they need to know, where they come from, and what their needs are.
Which you can.
Which is what tutoring is all about. And now tutoring has been made personalized by Khan Academy.
Khan Academy, sure. Yeah. Great job.
He's allegedly done that. I haven't tested it, but that's what my understanding. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is now you have these, there's several different companies, DIDs, Synthesia, others that create these virtual personas of you, trained on your voice, trained on your mannerisms, trained on this podcast if we wanted to. And it can do first of all, it can get your voice dead on great. And then secondly, it can do a pretty good job with your mannerisms and look and feel and so forth. So, but I think it does create a longing for the authentic. Mm-hmm. So if you are fed lots of that because you can distribute it, then to really have FaceTime with Omar.
Yeah,
I agree.
And that's why I want to say thank you for spending the time with us today.
Exactly. There's a hedge play here on this one, I think. Rex, we need to take to the private equity. Omar, we can't thank you enough for doing this. It's been like really one of the greatest pleasures of my career experience, my life, to sort of get an opportunity to work with you. So I'm forever grateful that you brought us in to work with you and the rest of the professors to really figure out a new way of thinking about marketing in totality, and especially around how this AI works. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Great talking to you. Take care.
Well, that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can get transcripts and more information on our website, decodingaiformarketing.com. And learn more about MMA membership options, go to MMAglobal.com. Thanks for listening.